A builder sacked because they pointed out fire safety defects. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, I'm Florian Heise and welcome to another episode of Heise Says. I've got my stein of coffee here and it is a lovely Saturday morning here in Brisbane where we've actually gotten some rain for, well, a long time and we really need it. Now I thought we would look at this article because a viewer sent me an email highlighting some issues on one side of Australia where they are having personal experience with fire safety defects in buildings. Now this follows on from another tip I received from another person from the industry on the other side of Australia saying the exact same thing. Now we had a look recently at what was happening in Newcastle, where when they had water damage due to testing of some of the pipes in a high-rise building, they discovered missing concrete in some of the walls. You know, so like a hole in a wall, that is the ultimate lack of fire protection, because that means you don't even have a wall. So for those of you that aren't familiar, in buildings and apartment buildings and all types, you have different compartments. Now, you can just put fire sprinklers everywhere. You'll see in a big shopping center, there are fire sprinklers everywhere to manage the fire and to cool down the smoke to get you out of the buildings. And they also have different compartments. And that's portions of the building where they seal off from each other, where you've got fire doors. You'll often walk past the shopping center and you'll see that they'll close going down a corridor, and that will separate two parts of the building. So that means if there's a fire in one building, that should isolate it from the rest of the building. It should also isolate and contain the smoke, contain its spread, giving people enough time to evacuate out of the building. Now, in an apartment building, every apartment is separated. And there's fire ratings in the walls between the different apartments, between the apartments and the corridor outside. That means if you live in an apartment, go have a look at your door going out into the corridor. You should see it should be a fire rated door, and there should be a little metal plaque on there telling you what's required. And those doors have much more onerous performance requirements than just the normal door. A normal door, you could pretty much punch through it if you needed to. Some of these cheap doors, where a fire door is solid, even in the framing, it's meant to be a steel frame and you're meant to fill it with concrete. It just depends on the system that you use. So they're not, they are meant to contain the fire and the smoke and the heat in there so you can get out. That's the point. These are all very serious life safety issues. And Rachel spoke about this a few years ago with regards to Q1 down the Gold Coast, where they had some really, really stupid design decisions which caused some problems. So let's have a read through this article. Builder claims he was sacked for pointing out fire safety defect. A building subcontractor who claims he was sacked for highlighting a fire hazard in a Queensland apartment tower has vowed to fight his dismissal as the construction union seizes upon the flammable cladding crisis to bolster its campaign. Plasterer Troy Cothlier claimed he and a fellow worker were dismissed from the Southport construction site in June after repeatedly raising concerns about plastering work with the developer. Okay, this sounds very familiar. They basically said, if I didn't like it, I could leave, he told the Sydney Morning Herald, The Age. Why is this being discussed in Sydney and not on the Gold Coast? So hang on, I'll zoom out a little bit there. I brought it up on many occasions to point out that the way the fire rating was being carried out was completely incorrect. See, the plasterers, they're the ones that are going to notice it because they're putting the plaster, they're the ones that are covering it up. Particularly, say, if you've got a penetration going from one floor to another, because, you've got the walls in an apartment building and you've got penetrations, usually, your kitchen waste and storage and your pipes and those type of things coming down. Now, what you need to do is, that's drilling through the concrete, because the concrete is, depending on the thickness, it has a fire rating. It just inherently, because it's concrete. And if you have a penetration through there, that can allow the fire to get through. Even a small one. Even a piece of metal can heat up and then catch fire on the other side. So it completely negates the point of having this system separating these two zones. You need to have a fire collar around the penetration, around the pipe, so that when it heats up, it expands and crushes the pipe and encloses that penetration through there. So after the fire, of course, you need to repair it. It's not gonna unexpand and be not like Star Trek, but that those need to be put in place for fire safety issues. So this is where, if you're just imagine you're putting plaster up on the ceiling or on the walls, you're going to notice these things. And he has a duty of care. He has a duty of care to inform the relevant people of this issue. So he's done it. He's done it. He can go to bed sleeping right. But the fact that they've called him up on it or they've sacked him, there you go. This is where it comes down to the policing of the industry. The traditional police aren't being effective. So, but the developer dismissed his claim as a vicious complaint by a disgruntled worker, which he denies. So, okay, that sounds like a claim, but the thing is, if I'm having people telling me this on different parts of the country, that are completely unrelated to these issues, yeah. I'm not going to let this go, he said. The developer said it had employed independent structural engineers to certify the work and that there was nothing wrong with the plastering work. Okay, a structural engineer can't sign off on on fire things. Structural engineers sign off on structure. You need a fire engineer to sign off on the fire installations. Right now it's a subby that does those installations, that signs the form, that hands it to the certifier. All the certifier does is look at the form. That couldn't cause any problems, could it, Florian? A spokesman for the Queensland Building and Construction Commission said it had inspected the area complained about along with an independent engineer and found defects that have since been rectified by the builder as a result of the QBCC's involvement. So there you go. Why is the builder using the QBCC as their defect checker? Why is the builder using that? That's insane. Okay, a good builder should not be falling on, and I know they're not. They were caught. They shouldn't be falling on the QBCC to do that for them. You wouldn't expect that, would you? You'd expect a fit-for-purpose job. A state and federal building ministers prepare to meet on Thursday to discuss, and this is from a few months ago, on Thursday to discuss how to ensure buildings meet safety standards, including no flammable cladding. After the Victorian government announced a $600 million rectification scheme, the union has weighed in. CFMEU National Construction Secretary David Nolan said it was sheer luck that no one had died in any of the Australian apartment tower blazes involving flammable cladding, which was implicated in the destruction of Grenfell Tower fire in the United Kingdom that killed 72 people. We see important structural work on buildings which should be physically inspected by an engineer that's being signed off based on someone taking a photo on an iPhone and emailed or texting in, he said. Well, I never thought I'd agree with the unions, but yeah, he's right there. This just shouldn't be happening, and it does. The CFMEU targeted the yet-to-be-finished Southport Tower on Tuesday when union members stood holding placards alleging that the building was unsafe. Mr. Noonan said the flammable cladding crisis could have been avoided if governments listened to the union, which has been advocating for a national response to the problem for 4 years. Well, not just the unions, all the professional bodies. The Institute of Architects, for one, has been raising concern with this. And I don't know, just everything else I've heard about the CFMEU, I can't see them as the good guys, because there's another thing where they're not really taking care of the members either. I'll talk about that in another video. So the developer said the union had taken up his case in a cynical attempt to increase its membership, noting the Southport construction site was non-union. Yes, I mean, I doubt we're seeing these type of defects happen on union sites too, guys. It doesn't make any difference at all, it appears. Master Builders Australia Chief Executive Danita Warren accused the CFMEU of grandstanding on the flammable cladding issue, saying the unions had no standing or liability under the National Construction Code. Well, yeah, that's it. They've got no responsibilities at all. At all. So, who cares? It's just political, guys. It just shows the severity of unions' relevance deprivation syndrome, she said. Minister for Industry Karen Andrews said Thursday's Building Ministers Forum was a chance for all jurisdictions to demonstrate once and for all that they are committed to working together in ensuring a nationally consistent building sector. We have that. See, this is the problem. We already have the legislation in place. This is not that the legislation doesn't exist. This is that people are cutting corners. It's that simple. To the traditional policemen of the industry, the architects and the certifiers, the fact that we don't even have any clerk of works anymore on site, that's the issue. That's the issue. They're all working for the builders. You're all employed for the builders. You know, as an architect, you raise an issue to a contractor, go, no, I'm not happy with what you're doing there, you should do it this way. Oh, boom, you're fired. There you go. That's it. That's the danger and the conflict of interest there. And it's hard to make that call, particularly if you've got to pay your mortgage, you've got to pay your school fees, you've got to keep your staff employed. You're going to take the fall on something that no one will ever know about, and you'll just lose work. Okay, so there's some serious issues there, and it all comes back to how these buildings are procured. More legislation and more government involvement, we don't need it. It's just going to be false theater of safety, because we've had all of these rules in place. Where's it going to end? Are we going to have all staff on a construction site monitored with cameras and then AI bots observing them? It's going to be horrific. Or we're going to eventually get to robotic construction or off-site construction with more guarantees. What's going to happen? The federal government is asking the states and territories to participate in a task force funded by the Commonwealth to implement recommendations of a landmark report that last year outlined a nationally consistent regulatory approach. Well, there you go. So let's have a look at this letter, this email that I received, because it's very similar. Well, frankly, it's exactly the same as hints. You know, this is from WA, and I heard the same thing from contacts in Newcastle. So and I rang him up and he gave me permission to use this. So that's why I'm not telling you who he is. Or she. Could be a she. I'm not being sexist. Yeah, chicks in chicks. There you go. Actually, I remember there was one job where we were doing a crane lift, and who are the people that hold the wires on the cranes? You know when you're doing a big lift, you've got people holding the guide ropes on whatever's going up. And I remember this one girl doing it. And she was a looker. You know, I tell you, she'd probably hold her own with the boys. Anyway, I've better be careful my wife watches these. So the last 5 projects I've worked on, in addition to the project I'm currently working on, have had massive fire stopping issues. So 1, shaft wall systems installed incorrectly, penetrations and wrong components used. So this is where, when he's saying like wrong components, when you're installing a fire system, okay, when say you get Kumpf or Rondo or CSR, when you put their system into a building, like say you're using it to separate 2 SOUs, you need to copy their system with their components and their recommendations 100%. If you don't use their components, you don't use their system, you don't have a system. You don't have a fire-rated product, because you are not buying just the gyprock and sticking it on there. You're buying the entire system that you need to install. And that's the problem when people don't use the right components. So surface and structural penetrations are not fire stopped correctly. So this is where they're doing the dodge. Fire dampers completely missed. Bit of pink non-compliant fire foam squirted into gaps to fix the problems. Can you see that happening? Where some areas were too hard to access due to works not being sequenced properly, just closed up quickly to prevent questions being asked. Now that, number 5, is the biggest issue. So we refused to close up a few areas as they were clearly done incorrectly and told the builder. Got told to be quiet. It's not as concern. The specialist fire stopping contractor came back and squirted some more mastic onto the joints, used the wrong type of mastic, should have been intermittent, and was told he's done, close it up. I remember when I was first working as a graduate for the Architectural Practice Academy, there's another colleague working on a job, and the issue on that job was that the builder had engaged a fire, a consultant to do all the penetrations and the fire collars and everything, who wasn't actually licensed to do it. So they had to get someone else in to come and sign off on someone else's work. And I mean, I was shocked that someone was willing to do that. So the building certifier was questioned. We got an extremely vague email where it just suggested a couple of things. Generic materials that have fire in the name, essentially putting the question back on the builder. See, this is the thing. The building certifier, with all due respect, are just bureaucrats. They are not allowed to give you design advice. They can't give you instructions. They need to question a fire engineer for what meets those requirements, not the certifier. The certifier can't tell you what to do. The certifier can only look at the piece of paper and say, yep, that form's filled out correctly. They're not there checking everything, guys. This is the problem. What people, there seems to be a disconnect from what consumers expect and what is really happening. So the builder took it as they were correct. There was also a suggestion. Well, here's another thing. All of this information, where's it all go? Where's it kept on record? If you've ever worked on a building and tried to get all drawings, I recently had an email from someone requesting drawings from me for a fit out we did years ago. And I'm going, well, you know, the client has that. You need to contact them. And I never heard back from them. But it just shows you that this information is always created and lost, created and lost. And you need it in writing. Like if you go to the, here and previously, the QBCC, we tried to report a client that was breaking the law. They wanted pretty much signed off on writing documents saying I'm guilty before they would even bother looking into it. So it questions, what's the point then in having this legislation if it isn't really policed? So there was also a suggestion for some areas where fire pillars should be used. However, you can't install fire collars onto a fire pillar, which were required for this instance. Also, every job I've worked on where there were fire pillars, they always ended up on the floor and not put back in place. So if we look here, we'll just do a image search to look at, here we go. We'll jump over here just to give people who aren't familiar with it an example. I mean, here you go. Fire stop. I assume these aren't fire, or maybe they are, but you get what we mean, what he's referring to here. And then we'll do another one. We'll do fire collar. You can see the difference here. Okay, we've got a fire pillow, and you can see it all going to crap, can't you? Compared to this type of thing here, where it'll expand and crush what's happening. So I've always understood them to be used in renovations and where fire compliance needs to be maintained on a daily basis. You use these as a temporary fix until you install a permanent system. The buildings are class 2, 3 and 9. So class 9 are assembly buildings and some of them are aged care. The jobs have been completed by builders in the top 15 tiers of builders in WA. And he can't talk about them. Or she can't talk about them. So I'm hearing about this now in Queensland, from this example, in New South Wales, and in Western Australia with my humble little YouTube channel. So how much do you think's going on? Let me know in the comments, guys, if you've got examples, or if you've seen this happen. And I think we're just lucky that our systems here in Australia, fire safety systems, are designed so well. I think we've just got lucky. Let me know what you think, guys. Would you buy a building if there was dodgy fire rating between your units? I think we all know the answer. Take care, have a good weekend, and collect that rain if you're in Queensland, guys. I'll talk to you later.